Tonight on Cosmic Cantina, with the recent United flight that avoided near disaster from an exploding engine, literally above our heads here in Colorado, we decided we wanted to investigate UFO crashes. Released documents have noted that we may or may not have downed alien aircraft in our possession, but what does that mean for humanity? Secret technology being developed in the black world? Or was all the wreckage instantly incinerated because it was dripping in alien ebola? Who the hell knows? Either way, we did manage to retrieve some interesting stories from the constant near disaster that is the Cosmic Cantina. Enjoy. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and every week I go to my favorite bar, Cosmic Cantina, and kick back with my co-hosts, Josh Golombeski and Matt O'Connor. We talk about aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, ancient cultures, and anything from the unseen world that needs a little illumination. Welcome to Cosmic Cantina. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and tonight I kind of splurged. I got some Rex Hill Pinot Noir from Oregon, and it is fantastic. So, cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Cheers. I picked up a little red wine as well, actually. It's from the McLaren Vale here in Australia. A little Shiraz called Brave New World. Because I am in a brave new world. I'm in a world of sweaty bravery right now. So fucking hot. And can I just say, I'm drinking in the morning. Look at the fucking suffering I'm doing for my art right now. I'm drinking in the morning to entertain the people of Cantina Land out there. And my God.
All right, come
like
on.
If I wasn't doing a show, people would rightly so be asking questions. You all right, Matt? Everything all right?
Even in Australia?
Yeah, even in
It's
Australia.
just like, cool. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just beer in the mornings, right? Just red wine's a little much.
Beers for
Classy.
breakfast, yeah. Red
Well,
wine's a little bit.
I feel guilty because you're drinking in the morning, being a good soldier for this show. And
I don't
tonight
feel
I'm
guilty.
having ginger tea with chamomile in it.
What?
So no booze for Josh tonight.
Oh, that's right. You're on the dry February?
Yeah, I didn't do dry January because that's for followers. I did dry February. No, I still drink on the weekends. Don't worry about it. But no, don't worry. I won't be any less enthusiastic. I'll still seem kind of tipsy.
Excellent.
So I promise that.
No fun. Well, thank you, Matt, for always drinking in the morning,
Yeah,
no matter
Yeah.
what podcast it is.
You
You're
guys
a
are
great
welcome.
teammate.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. And your $100 haircut looks great too. I mean,
more curls.
yeah, mostly.
So
Yeah.
much better than
Curls
your
with it.
hat last week, because the hat
Yeah,
was
so
no
much
bueno.
bounce. Yeah, we took a survey, and my hat was the favorite hat of the three of us.
Nope.
Melissa was number 2. Matt was 3. No? Oh, okay. Yeah,
Really?
whatever. You took a survey
No.
of one friend at work.
Yeah. Apparently, people liked my hat better. So you were number 2, and then Matt was number
Yeah,
3.
I had no fluffiness. I had zero to work with. Anyway.
All right, you guys,
What are we doing?
we have important stuff to talk about right now. Here's the thing. If you haven't watched, we now have video of our podcast. So if you want to watch us, just so you know, last week was our first one on video. And this week, we are also on video. So if you want to see us rambling and talking and doing whatever, check us out. It's on our page, thecosmiccantina.com. Under video, you can watch all of the episodes that we have for video, and then also on our YouTube channel. And if you need help with that, ping us at any time, because we love you. I just want to take this moment, maybe because I'm drinking red wine and I'm feeling emotional. I just want to say we do this for you guys, for the fans, for Cosmic Cantina fans. We
I'll drink
love
in the
all your
morning with that.
comments. We love all your comments. We love all your input, and we do this for you. And I just want to say I love you. Okay.
Great. But please still, if you can, even if you're watching the YouTube show, please download the podcast on whatever you download podcasts on, because we need that ad revenue. Yeah.
Australia. Okay. All right. So what are we talking about today? Well, speaking of fans, I got an article that somebody asked if we could cover, and I thought it was really interesting, so I got into it. And the article is called Stunning Admission. Pentagon admits it has been testing wreckage from UFO crashes and findings and may change our lives forever, experts say. So as you know, there's some kind of disclosure happening and there's document dumps happening. But this one specifically is saying that they admit that they have been testing wreckages from UFO crashes. So that's kind of big, right? So I'm going to read some of the data points from this article, and then we'll kind of dissect it a little bit.
All right.
Researcher Anthony Bragalia wrote to the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, requesting details of all UFO material which they hold and results of any tests that have been carried out on it. In the response shared with The Sun, this is where the article came from, the DIA released 154 pages of test results that include reports on a mysterious memory metal called nitinol, which remembers its original shape when folded. I know that we've seen this.
Ooh, wait, that's interesting. Sorry to jump in right away, but you know me. I know a lot about this bullshit. Well, what do we know about that type of metal from Roswell? We know that that was the metal that supposedly the guy found in the debris field, and that it had the same. Once you did it whatever you wanted to, it went back to its normal shape.
And it's also, since that, it's been in tons of sci-fi movies. It's been talked about in a lot of crash site. No matter who you've interviewed or whatever's been published, they talk about this kind of metal. So interesting. All right, I'm going to continue. Bragalia said it was a stunning admission from the U.S. government, and the documents reveal that some of the retrieved debris possess extraordinary capabilities, quote, including the potential to make things invisible or even slow down the speed of light. The Pentagon has admitted to holding and testing anomalous debris from UFOs. The article mentioned the debris from the UFOs, now called UAPs, as being that they had been analyzed in this document by a private defense contractor. It does not name the contractor in this document. However, the agency has held back certain details about the materials, including any information about that they could be of alien origin. Stating in the letter, I have determined that some portions of 5 documents must be withheld in part from disclosure. So, again, even in the video and, of course, on our site, we will post these articles. But in this article, there is the letter from this investigator who has sent a letter to the DIA requesting these documents. They gave him the 154 documents, but they are saying we are withholding 5 of those documents because they are not ready for disclosure right now. So that's all in the letter. You can check that out, either here on the video or also on our website.
Are they saying, they're not ready for disclosure, or the public's not ready for disclosure?
No, they're saying they're not ready to disclose that information. So there's out of the 154 documents that have been released to this investigator, 5 of them have been withheld. And this investigator says they are omitting information on the chemical and elemental composition of the material as well as its origin.
Oh, that's right. Isn't that what
disclosure?
Wasn't Jacques Vallée? His big thing at the moment is testing isotopes to see where it came from, and a lot of the stuff they're testing they're able to establish it didn't even come from this universe or this this galaxy.
That's
I guess
weird.
Right.
That's
like
weird.
It comes from beyond, which is crazy.
Beyond.
Yeah.
Right. Which that would kind of support that testing, right? But they're admitting those pages. So. This is really interesting. It's interesting because first of all, it's not in the New York Times. Maybe New York Times and Washington Post and all these places and Time Magazine will pick it up in like 5 months from now, as you know how these things happen. And it'll be like new news. But right now, it's in the Sun, which is, debatable source. However, I wanted to bring something up. So we wanted to really dive into crash sites and all the amazing investigators who have really brought this to the surface before disclosure. But I want to return to the famous site, which is Roswell. I honestly hate talking about Roswell because people talk about it so much. But
it's important, though.
They do. What, you don't agree with me, Matt?
No, they do. No,
they do.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I can't stand talking about it. You're right. I'm with you.
Getting all saucy with my red wine. So watch out. buddy.
What did you fucking say to me?
I'm not allowed
Sorry,
to swear.
Mrs. Diddle.
My mom was really offended. She was like, I did not say you couldn't. But, okay, whatever.
You're in my head, Mrs. Tittle. Damn it.
All right, so I want to bring your attention to Roswell, but I'm going to try to take a different angle on it. Okay, so the world's first nuclear explosion occurs on July 16th, 1945, when a plutonium implosion device was tested at a site located 210 miles south of Los Alamos, New Mexico, on the barren plains of the range. All right, so this is the testing that they're doing for the atomic bomb. July 16th, 1945.
Okay.
So I did some research. I mean, I've heard about this stuff, but I want to take it from a I took the information that I'm about to tell you from a certain site. It's from Chuck Wade's site. He's a UFO investigator, but he's also from Corona, New Mexico, and grew up during this time when Roswell had happened. So he's like a big investigator in the space, and he has a website, and he does talks and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to bring up his personal account of what happened in New Mexico around 1947.
Okay.
So, Chuck Wade, just real quick, grew up in Corona, New Mexico, right in the middle of the state, close to the events known as the Roswell Incident in 1947. It happened 30 miles southeast from where he lived. Mac Brazil, who's a big person, who's the first person to kind of to notice that there's a crash site. He's a rancher. He's one of the people mention if you're really into the Roswell case. Brings it to attention to the townspeople.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's something going on. He actually calls the military. That's this guy, right? So Mac Brazil found a large amount of debris on the Foster Ranch where he was the foreman. And Mac came to Corona and requested that Chuck Wade's dad close his bar and go with him out to the ranch to help him pick up this debris. He wanted to investigate it. Unfortunately, Chuck Wade's dad was like, man, I don't want to, I'm busy, right? He didn't understand it was a UFO crash. He's like, the biggest UFO crash! But he's like, let me help you call the authorities. So this is why Chuck Wade talking about this stuff I think is kind of interesting. Anyway, so I'll post this guy's site. You can hear his whole story. You can analyze it. In his view of what happened in Roswell, he talks about how he had worked for the military and he believes that they were actually shooting down these crafts, and then that's why they were crashing. But I have a slightly different take. So within this time period, after July 16th, 1945, when we were testing the atomic bomb, 7 UFO crashes happen in New Mexico. Not just Roswell. There's 6 more. All right, so I'm going to list them for you. According to Chuck Wade's site, the first UFO crash was at San Antonio, New Mexico in August 1945. So this is literally a month later after the atomic explosion or the testing. He said this was like an avocado-shaped craft that was reported. The second UFO crash happened the night of July 2nd, 1947, on the plains of San Agustin, New Mexico. The third crash is still being studied by the MUFON investigators Chuck Zawoski and Debbie Ziegelmeyer. They're calling this site the alternative site, southwest of Roswell. The fourth UFO crash occurred at Hot Corso site north of Roswell the night of July 4th, 1947. Roswell was July 8th, 1947. The sixth UFO crash site was in the Jim Ragsdale site located 53 miles west of Roswell in the foothills of the Captain Mountains. And the seventh was located in the Hart Canyon about 9 miles north of Aztec, New Mexico. And that was March 25th, 1948.
Wow, I've heard of that one before, but I've never heard of all 7. That's a flurry coming in at you hot.
It's a flap.
Right?
Bang.
So literally, I mean, look, I'm just suggesting maybe there's a connection. We start this atomic testing, and then boom, all of a sudden we have like people aren't even seeing UFOs. They're just crashing. I mean,
What a time to be alive.
If I could get you to maybe just speculate wildly on what happened here, could you just go nuts? What happened? Did we open up some sort of
we opened up
time
some kind
portal, rip in space and time that really
ripping space
fucked
and
with-
time?
Yeah.
I mean, possibly. I mean, like, again, speculation, no evidence. In fact, I tried to call a couple of physicist friends of mine, but they didn't answer my email. But, you know, it was
They
today,
didn't?
So
That happens to me all the time with my physicist friends. Yeah, I don't
I
understand.
was like, come on, just give me
I don't
something.
understand
Give me something. Come on. But, you know, it was just today. So maybe if I would have given it a little bit more time. So here's the thing. It's strange. I don't know if it's a rip in time, if it's some kind of like domino effect within the dimensions. I have no idea. I don't know, but I'm just saying it's sort of strange. I want to
Well,
bring
there's two things
something-
going on there. Wait, there's two things
Okay.
going on there. One, there's an increased amount of them. So it's not just the crashes. I mean, 7 crashes is just a crazy amount of crashes, but that means there was high traffic in the area at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
what you have to ask yourself, if these things have been present throughout time, I think there's a strong correlation that they were obviously there to look at nuclear weapons. What do we know from all the abductees and stuff? That they're always talking about how we're going to stop nuking the planet, how we got to save the environment and all this shit. Clearly, there's a correlation there. I don't think that is speculation. That is just a highly probable correlation at this point. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
that pops
clearly
up a
there's a
lot.
connection to it. Yeah, why they got shot down? We can talk about that in a little bit. That's where it gets like a little sketchy. You're like, really? Like radar took them down? But go on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But that's from Chuck Wade's site. He believes that's what they were doing. They were shooting them down. But I don't know. Just saying. Okay, I just want to bring something up that just random weirdness that I've gathered, and you can all put it together. Maybe we put it together at the end of the show. I don't know. Maybe you're just like, she's crazy. So I was doing. What were you gonna say? I'm a little
No,
saucy
sorry, go on.
tonight.
No,
Wait,
what were you saying? No.
wait, what? Who's
Didn't
gonna
say
challenge me? Come on.
Sassy.
Crazy like a fox.
Wait, that's not what foxes make.
No, whatever. It's close enough.
All right. So I was doing a Hudson Valley investigation several months ago, last year. And if you don't know the Hudson Valley case, there's a major flap that happened in the 80s. There was a major return flap happening in the late 90s, and there's another flap happening currently right now. So, but what I was studying was that just in the Hudson Valley area alone, the only time, or no, I'd say the only time, but most of these increased amounts of visibility that people were seeing, like weird crafts and strange stuff was happening, was always in the months of July and March.
Really? Okay.
And it was, you know, people see stuff all the time, but the increased amount where there was so much activity was in these 2 months. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't really have a conclusion of why that happens, but it just seems to, it's a consistent pattern. And July is obviously the month that we were testing the atomic bomb, and then of course these situations seem to keep happening. If you notice, all the dates that I mentioned were in July or March, just in New Mexico alone for what I was talking about. Interesting.
Huh.
All right, so
Yeah, it is.
another odd fact, and you can be like, that's really random, Melissa. I had no idea. So July is, if you're into esoteric stuff and you're into the Freemasons and the Founding Fathers and all the weird esoteric stuff that's in our country, July 4th is a very important day to create independence within a country. But the month of July is really important because the month of July in ancient Egypt is a celebration of the birth of Ra. Now, if you don't know what Ra is the energy of the sun. He's the god that represents the sun, but it's mostly a frequency. And if you know what represents Ra, it is the all-seeing eye that's on the dollar bill. It's the obelisks that are all over the world in powerful places, including in Washington, D.C. That is the power of Ra. That's the frequency he's supposed to channel, and those are the symbols. And that
I mean,
is-
those obelisks are literal big dick energy. That's what that is.
Solid morning woods just out there in the world. Rep it.
Hello, we rule the world. It's such a man thing. I'm just going to put a huge dick in front of my capital.
A man would do that.
Yeah, they would.
Especially 8 of them. Okay. All right. I'm going to go on.
All right. Sorry.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, so like so basically, it's not a person. It's this energy. It's this frequency. It's the power of the sun. It's the power of creation. It's the very center of the universe. That's what it represents. That's the ancient celebration of July that's been going on for 5,000-6,000 years. Strange. Maybe a connection. Now, the month of March is the celebration of Bastet, which is the goddess who's sometimes called the Eye of the Moon. She's a cat-like goddess dedicated to fertility and protection. She's one of the daughters of Ra, alongside Hathor and Sekhmet. This is a frequency, not a person, but it is the opposite of the moon, or the opposite of the sun. It's the moon, so it's a completely different frequency, but it is a balancing frequency on Earth. I'm just saying. Okay. Ancient celebrations, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
Now, let's go back to Roswell. So if my crazy speculation, specifically because I've had a lot of Pinot that I love.
Go on.
Yes.
Go on. Let's just say there's some truth to some kind of rip in time and space or dimensions that might have happened by testing the atomic bomb. Where do we drop the atomic bomb?
Japan.
Twice.
So, listen to this. I just found this article. It was published in 2020. And the article is talking about how if we encounter UFOs, we should really look to Japan as the model for encountering UFOs. Like, why in the world, in 2020, are we looking to Japan to talk about some kind of protocol with encountering UFOs? Have they encountered a lot of UFOs? I mean, I didn't even know this until I read this article. But then it says, more than 50 years ago, Japan was regarded as a model for dealing with extraterrestrials. The U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, made recommendations if humans were to encounter aliens from space that they should follow the protocol of Japan. Now, again, it doesn't really go into the protocol of Japan, but within this article, it says it has disclosed a 1968 paper that says the Japanese way was a good example of a simulation with other technologies from other planets and maintaining their identity even if their technology was inferior to the other ones. I don't know what that means, but this suggests that at some point Japan has also had some kind of flurry of crashes, possibly some kind of UFO encounters. Japanese public has not been immune to UFO sightings over the years. In 1956, reports came out that during 1940s and 50s, reports of silver metallic strips, like pieces of paper, were seen fallen from the sky in certain residence areas. So this same kind of metal, this memory metal,
just falling from the sky, not a crash.
Falling from the sky.
But it was floating. That pops up in my story actually too, which is interesting.
Really?
Just
interesting.
briefly, but we'll get there.
Shedding.
Yeah.
There's also Fukushima is known as a UFO town. Fukushima. My thought process is Japan really hasn't disclosed all the UFO activity that's been happening. I'm sure there's not like a major MUFON presence there, but this article, which of course we'll post, is suggesting that the government has been studying the way that they have been encountering UFOs, and they feel like the United States should do the same. It's just odd that they also had the same, we also dropped an atomic bomb on Japan, and then we also had the same kind of flurry of strange crash activity when we tested the atomic bomb here in the United States. Maybe a connection? I don't know. Is there a connection between most crashes and UFO sightings are in July and March? I'm not sure. But
yes.
What I would say is the one connection that maybe brings it together is that there's some frequency that connects, that thins, if you will, or allows for things to pass through, maybe in the July and March, and possibly with our own technology, we're interfering with it, and it's causing maybe some of these UFOs to crash, and for us to get their technology. I don't know, just a thought, wild speculation, just a random dump of information that you can do whatever you want with.
Speculate away. Well, it gave me the chills a little bit because one of my stories takes place in March. So that's either random or a 1 in 12 chance, you know?
So Josh, that's so crazy about March. So you ran into the same thing, that there's a lot of cases in March and July, right?
Well, I ran into at least one, but it makes me want to go back. And there's a lot of these stories, and I didn't track every single date and every crash retrieval story I dug up from the interwebs. But right away, the first one I'm going to tell is March. So that means we're onto something. That's a synchronicity, because I believe in that shit. So yeah, this is one of my favorite topics of all time, and I think that's highly interesting, the research you pulled up. I'm going to go into a couple different things, but before I do, there's one awesome thing I want to give my disclosure friends out there who are pumped for disclosure, give you a little candy to anticipate what's going to happen. But this comes from To the Stars Academy. This is what, I'm just going to read this to you. So this is a question. Are these 3 videos the only one you've seen? An interviewer named Gadi Schwartz asked Elizondo, who came forward from the Pentagon program, on the NBC's The Overview Show, which features the UAP bill that just came out of Congress. And this is what Luis Elizondo replied. They are some of the least compelling videos. We've seen things 50 feet away from the cockpit. He hasn't said anything like that. He's been so careful to not say anything about anything else he's seen or knows. But the fact he said that is a big deal to me. Like, I need to see these pictures. I need to see what the fuck's going on. So that's a really interesting little thing going on in the disclosure world. Okay. So crash retrieval. First, the godfather of crash retrieval stories, a reporter, not someone who's experienced it, is a guy named Leonard Stringfield, who I actually have never heard of his work or read his work before, but he's a big name who wrote a lot of books, and I, some odd reason, never come across him as a super UFO nerd. It just shows you. Yeah, well, I feel like I should now. I'm a little embarrassed that you do and I don't. Why? You know about Leonard? You know good old Leonard?
Yeah, of course.
Leroy?
I've definitely heard that name for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely been on a lot of History Channel shows. Like, we mentioned his work a lot.
Oh, really? Okay, well, God rest his soul. But he, one of the interesting things he talks about is not just the big cases, which I'm going to get into, or the ones with lots of crazy shit going down that are highly entertaining, which I promise I have. He would just tell stories of, and I haven't got deeply into it, but it'd be like an old couple somewhere in the West watching TV, and all of a sudden a reporter is at a crash site talking about a UFO that just crashed. And back then, in like the 50s, 60s, or whenever, they didn't record anything, so they'd see the story and be like, holy shit, a UFO crashed, and then nothing. They'd hear nothing. National news, everything would die. Like, there's no follow-up at all. And I just thought little nuggets like that are just so fucking fascinating to me. It feels more real to me in some of these crazy, crazy stories you come across. So tonight, I'm really going to go into Clifford Stone, God rest his soul too, who was a sergeant who worked for the Army. And he worked for primarily a NBC team, which is nuclear, biological, and chemical, not warfare, cleanup crew. So he was trained in that, which makes sense for what I'm going to get into. Before I get into him, I'm going to tell a quick story in the book from Disclosure from Dr. Stephen Greer that will connect to Clifford Stone. This is a story from Lance Corporal Jonathan Wygant, who was a Marine. And this happened in Peru in 1997 in March. Which is really, really weird.
See? I'm not so fucking crazy. Sorry, Mom.
No.
Sorry, Mom. I didn't say it. It was Josh. I didn't do it. I didn't say it.
No, I'm going to keep that in my mind whenever I do UFO research. March and July. It's really, really fascinating. I don't know the connection yet, so I have no idea what the fuck that means, but it must mean something. So this guy was a security agent who was brought down to this facility in Peru in the mountains where they were supposedly tracking drugs. They were down there looking for airplanes and people going through the jungle with drugs.
Ooh,
one night,
such a good setup for a movie. Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it's really crazy what happens here. So like this radar station, all of a sudden his boss was like, okay, there's a crashed plane out there. We need you and your guys to get out there right away. So him and his buddy bolt out into the jungle. They go a couple hours into the jungle, and they come across this crazy, crazy scene. So he comes across this giant cliff wall, and there's just like a big dig in the ground, like something slid and then hit the side of the wall, and it's like a classic egg-shaped UFO with a weird light around it. and it has a couple things in the back, like little portholes that come out. I don't know if they were there before it crashed or they popped open or what it was. But he starts walking towards it, and he sees all this like luminescent stuff all over the ground, and it's really weird to look at it. One second you look at it, it's one color. Another second, it's another color. He's not sure what to make of it. He got some on himself. When he remembers it burned a little bit. And I was like, Jesus, man, last thing I'm going to do is touch any liquid coming from a fucking extraterrestrial craft anywhere. Who knows the fuck happened to you?
I just want to taste it.
What was he doing? Just keep your feet out of that shit.
So he starts getting It's like the angel hair, but it's like, you know, luminescent.
Oh, no, angel hair. I'm just going to let that fall all over my face and all over my body. I'm gonna
It's salty and burny.
It's wonderful.
I don't
Reminds me of
get
that
it.
time in college. What happened?
Whoa. We got to go back.
Wow. We're sharing, guys. We're sharing.
Shit. Hold on.
He's only drinking tea, everybody. He's only drinking tea.
I told you it'd be like I was drunk. So he gets closer to the craft, and this is something that's backed up by Cliff. I wanted to tell this story for a couple of reasons. It'll make sense later. He walks up to the craft. This is all in the movie book disclosure. This guy's a legit person who worked in the military, and he's been vetted. So he comes up to the craft, and immediately he starts to hear like a buzzing, and he starts to feel really good about it. He's like, I feel really good about this craft. I really want to go inside. And he notices a presence. He's like, there's someone in there. There's beings in there. Oh, I'm really good with this. This is awesome. I'm going in. I'm coming in, guys. And then his superior, all of a sudden, he blacked out. He was like, where am I? It was just him and his buddy who showed up. And his superior was like, get the fuck out of there. What are you doing? Back the fuck up, buddy. And he's like, okay, whoa. And he turns around. And all of a sudden, there's like a whole other team there. There's like all these other people. And they're like, and they immediately grab his ass, put him on a stretcher, and like tie his legs and arms down. He's like, what the fuck? You guys told me to come here. Why are you tying me up like crazy? So apparently they weren't really supposed to go first. That was like a miscommunication in the chain of command. He was not supposed to be there, but they got there. And then these other teams were there, and they pull his ass out. On his way out, he is getting pulled out, and he remembers, he looks to the side, and there's this team of in all hazmat suits coming by, a Cliffstone crash retrieval team, which I'll come back to in a minute. But he gets pulled out to a base somewhere else, not where he was hanging out, an underground facility where he's interrogated for days. He notices multiple different nationalities there, Chinese, Italian, all these different people there, like an international kind of like underground base in Peru near where he was, but he wasn't aware of. It might be in the same fucking facility. He just didn't know about it.
Hold on a second. Was it in the Nazca area?
That's a good... No, it was in the jungle. I don't remember exactly where.
Because there's apparently an underground base underneath the Nazca lines.
Oh, an alien base or a human secret base?
It's just an ancient base. It's supposedly, there's some people that admit that they've been down there, but it's like an ancient base that has been taken over by the military, but it's apparently underneath the Nazca lines.
Oh, interesting. Well, I don't think it was there. This is another base. This looks like a human base. But anyways, he was just shocked at why are all these people interested in this? And then he started looking here, like remembering back at his time at the radar facility, and he was like, yeah, I was hearing a lot of weird shit. They're definitely not tracking drugs. He remembers like these two radar officers just coming out and talking about like a UFO and an object landing. And at the end of the story, basically he believes that it got shot down, which is where I want to get to. Like, it was being targeted on purpose. It wasn't drugs, and it looks like this thing may have gotten hit by a Hawk missile, is what his conclusion was based off the wreckage when he was there and some facts he kind of learned after the fact. But typical situation. He was scared to death, sent on his way. This never happened. Don't ever talk about it again. That is awesome.
Sorry. Okay, can I just say something? This is a crazy story. So it happens in March. Chuck Wade from my story says that he thinks that they shot down all of those 7 crashes that happened, UFO crashes. Also, do you think that they were just like waiting for it to come into their space? You know what I'm saying? It's like...
Yes, actually. Yes. So what he concluded was that these things are actively going up and down from what he heard from the radar operators in the same type of places all the time. They knew they were coming. So they were waiting for their moment, and they shot at it, and maybe eventually they got one.
So it's a targeted mission. See?
Yeah, but not radar. Like, I think the Roswell stuff is all associated with an advanced radar system they weren't ready for, and then they adapted to it. That's what actually Cliff Stone says. He goes, Roswell was this radar that we had that was also developed and new in the same area we were developing nuclear weapons, and they showed up because of the nukes but weren't prepared for the radar, which they're not infallible, they're not the Pope, so like they got knocked down, and eventually they adjusted to it and the crashes stopped. Because even Cliff Stone goes into how like there hasn't been many crashes. He only talks about like under a dozen around the time of Roswell, which is interesting you said 7, because I never heard of more than like 2 or 3. I heard of the Aztec and the San Antonio one, or the Corona
Right.
one. But, so this brings me to Sergeant Stone. So I'm not saying he was part of the team that walked by this guy on the way out, but a team like that. So who's Sergeant Stone? Just like almost anyone who's had significant experiences in the military with UFOs had childhood experiences. I did not know this about Cliff Stone until today. I did not read it, but he wrote a book about it, and it doesn't shock me. It's just like Travis Walton. It's just like all these people who have these crazy experiences. There's a lead up to it, and they happen in it started in their childhood, which is just so fascinating. I don't know what that means at all. So, okay, this is a little history lesson that Stone liked to give in the Disclosure book about crash retrieval teams. So in the 1950s, the 462nd Air Intelligence Server Squadron had a program called Operation Blue Fly to recover all things that fell to Earth. It didn't necessarily mean UFOs. It could have been a Russian satellite, Russian plane, anything anomalous, a meteor, whatever, but it also was UFOs. That was expanded in 1957 to Project Moondust, which was really about UFOs. And Project Moondust was like basically going at the same time as Project Blue Book. It was the real UFO research. And it served 2 purposes, which was go after UFOs and after advanced technology from the Russians or whoever else, anything like that. But the name has changed over the years, and now it's wrapped up in an SAP, a Special Access Program. So we don't know what it's called today. But Stone is saying that only under 50 people total understand everything that's going on for the UFO phenomenon. He goes all into conspiracy and all the stuff we already know about covering up, but he's saying that like roughly under 50 people, that's it, who knows everything. So how did Stone get into this field? As I mentioned before, he went to NBC school. No, not for broadcast. He in Fort McCullen, Alabama, and he learned how to clean up nuclear, biological, and chemical spills in warfare. He was trained to go in and help. That's what his team did, which makes sense.
I imagine.
They use gloves
That was
and
a lot of
Geiger
the schooling.
counters and
Just
like
put some
and bee
gloves
suits. Yeah, just gloves and bee suits.
Just get a butt probe and put some gloves on and get in there.
You don't need a gloves from me. Just get the lube out. It's gonna be fine. So the the code word for all this
Where did
is
you go to
Tabasco.
college?
The Northeast. Everyone's uptight and secretly really, really kinky, but really conservative in public. You know, everyone's wearing a sweater. It's really interesting. Yeah, they're wearing jeans and a sweater. I'm like turned on. So, anyways, so the code word apparently is Tabasco. I don't know. I just want to throw it out there. Anything that happened with these teams was Tabasco. If they got lost,
Tabasco!
That was their fucking secret code word. I'm like, all right, it's all right.
You guys, let's make
Interesting
that.
little-
Can we make that our secret code word? Tabasco.
That's my safe word. Yeah.
That's your safe word. Is your safe word?
Tabasco.
So hot, so sweet. So it's a really good safe word. I mean,
It is. It is. Too hot.
Too
just do-
spicy.
we should just do a podcast on safe words. So basics. Okay, this is the basics of a recovery. What you know. This is what he says. They do an on-site analysis, and then they conceal and move the craft. He says the ETs are not dangerous, but people do die. Like he tells a story once where he was just in a craft, and I'll get into more stories in a second, where he's just operating some machinery. His boss is telling him to do it. He turned something weird on the ground, and all of a sudden he heard a quick noise and a flash, and he looked behind him, and the guy behind him was just gone. And his boss, who was like 20 yards behind him, was like, just keep working. He's gone. He's like, well, where'd he go? He goes, he's just gone. That's all you need to know. Finish the mission. And
Just
he's
don't
like,
hit that
okay.
button anymore.
Shit.
Yeah.
Where did he go?
It's clearly interdimensional. I'm going to get into that in a second. There's some weird shit going on with these crafts.
Oh,
It's not as
interesting.
simple as just like a craft that's 30 feet big, and it's really, really weird, but I'll get to that. So I just
Okay.
want to read a quick couple things from the book, really short excerpts that I thought were really interesting that go along with what I'm saying here. So the first one is this. This is what Clifford Stone says for the record. I am prepared to state that I have been at locations where craft of unknown origin that did not originate on the face of this planet were there. I am prepared to state that while I was there, we saw living and dead bodies of entities that were not born on this planet. I am prepared to state that we had what they referred to as interfacing with those entities. I am prepared to state that they have a school to try to indoctrinate people. I never went to that school. I always refused. So he was involved in this his whole life, his whole career, but he never went to this school, which you hear about over and over again, where you get really in the club and you really get to know. I guess you get to become one of those 50 people if you go to this school, but he never went, which is good for him. He's like a hero in this world. But I like Cliff's story because he's not like the Jesus Christ figure where everything got figured out because of him and he saved the world and the universe. It's all up to Cliff. It feels really realistic in how he tells these stories. So I just want to read that for you quick. Okay, so after his NBC training, he went to Virginia and then to the Pentagon. This is his first story. It's not even involved with a crash retrieval. They kind of like test you to see if you are ready for it. So he just goes to the Pentagon. He takes an elevator that goes way underground. And he's like, where the fuck are we going? And all of a sudden, there's a bunch of monorails. He comes to like an open area, and he's like, there's monorails? I didn't know there was anything below the Pentagon. They take the monorail for like 20 minutes, and he goes to a wall, and the guy he's with is like, go in there. And he's like, what do you mean, go in where? There's just a fucking wall. And he just pushes him, and he just like falls through the wall, basically. And he's in a room. And in the room, there's two guys. There's two guys interviewing a gray alien. Now, everything Clifford Stone talks about is the same alien every time. It's grays with a suit on that's like silver. And it's always the grays. It's never anything else. From what I understand, he only encountered grays. And the gray locked eyes with him, and suddenly he just was like, he could feel everything the gray was feeling, and he could tell immediately the gray knew everything about him immediately, and he passed out. He wakes up a day later. He wakes up back where he was earlier, and then that's like his initiation, basically. He doesn't say that, but that feels like what it was. It's like, see how this guy reacts to this alien.
He passes out. He's in!
He's in! So this dude has been everywhere. There's so many places. He's been to Indiantown Gap for a crash retrieval, which is in Pennsylvania. He gets emotional too. Like a lot of times when Cliff's telling the story, he doesn't get all the way into it because he just starts to almost cry, the guy, because it's such a powerful experience, and people died, and he just like loses it. So he gets into like how he was in Indiantown Gap. He went to Bentwaters after it happened. He was part of the Belgian UFO wave, which nothing crashed, but he was like involved in things that weren't even necessarily a UFO crash. But he talks about, here's one thing crazy before I get into my final story here. This is something where it's not a big story for him, but he just noticed this a couple times where he would come to a craft and there'd be a silver disc, it's crashed, and it's like 30 feet long. And they're like, cool. They go inside of it and they're looking around, and he's like, you know what, this seems a little bigger than 30 feet, guys. All right, let's take out the tape measure. So one guy will stay in one room, and then he just took this like long-ass tape measure, and he just kept going. And the tape measure went to like 100 feet, some fucking industrial tape measure, I guess. And it just stopped, and they were still like 50, 60 feet away from the wall. So whatever the fuck is going on with this technology is like they are somehow creating their own dimension, and apparently like they can be as small as a match car, but inside can be like a skyscraper. It hurts my brain to even understand how that is possible. Like I understand interdimensional and time space a little bit, and I can speculate, but that shit hurts. Like that's the stuff that's gonna bother people when this all comes out. It's not just like they're from another planet. It's like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like how is that possible? Yeah, like it makes me uncomfortable, and I love this shit, and I want to know more. I'm just like, oh my god, like that's so fucking weird. And like, where did that guy go who disappeared? Like, what's going on in these craft? They create their own gravity field, and I get what that means, and so they can move through space like, you know, but like a knife and butter, where they don't get affected by the environment. But like, that's hard for me to comprehend. Okay, here's the last story I want to tell, which is a really crazy story, but I fucking love it. So he was involved in Vietnam. He flew from the United States. I didn't tell him where he was going. They're like, we're going somewhere. And then like a day later, he shows up in Vietnam. He's helicoptered to Cambodia, where supposedly one of their friendly bombers went down, a B-12 bomber. It got shot down, apparently, and they couldn't find it. So they land in the jungle. They come to a river, and they start walking in the jungle, and they find the B-2 bomber. The first thing they notice is like, how did it crash? Like, there's no debris field. There's no trees. It looks like it was just neatly and carefully, without disturbing anything, placed gently on the ground. Now there's a giant missile hole in the back, and what he explained, it was a SAM, which is a surface-to-air missile. I think SAM-7, whatever that means. There's a hole, and it looks like most people got killed, and then he theorized that some people weren't dead fully, and they tried to fly back, but they couldn't for some reason, and they all died eventually. But what the fuck? Well, how did they get perfectly on the ground? So he's a little weirded out. He's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. And he also notices, and this is what makes sense, because I was prefacing this with all these stories beforehand, he notices this plane looks much smaller than a normal B-12 bomber, which is weird. I'm not saying it was a UFO. I'm not saying this was not a UFO, but did something shrink it? Like, what the fuck does that mean? So he was walking around it, and he's like, what is happening here? And then he looks into the jungle, and there's like 15 to 20 4-foot-tall grays in silver suits looking at him. And Cliff's like, okay. This is one of his earlier experiences, too, with the grays. It's like his second or third after the incident at the Pentagon. And he's like, he just kind of ignores them because he's kind of ready for that in some sense. But then in his head, he hears this. Clifford, what are you doing here? You are not
Sorry.
supposed to be here. It's that sing-songy shit we keep hearing about and through the UFO world. Clifford, what are you doing? So Clifford was like, what the fuck? Get that sing-songy shit out of my head. Bang, he loads up his M16 and he just starts mowing down fucking little bitch gray aliens in the jungle. Bam, 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 you little fucks. Like, if I was going to shoot any alien, I'd shoot a gray, just because I feel like they're robots and whatever grays. You bore me. So
Yeah,
he starts
but
firing.
Clifford, hold on. You don't understand. Like, if you haven't seen an interview with Clifford, and there's several, he actually has, like, feelings for them. Like, probably
He
after
does.
this Vietnam story. Like, he literally cries about the torture that humans were doing to these gray aliens just to figure out biologically how they existed. So, okay, keep going.
Right, he does feel bad. He goes a lot into that, and he does explain in this situation, he was just spooked. Something talked in his head. He was in the middle of the jungle. He had a gun, and it was an early experience, and he didn't know what the fuck was going on. I mean, I don't really blame him. Like, what are you doing, Grace? It's just like showing up and
Right.
abducting someone in their bedroom. Like, if I had a gun, I'd fucking shoot at a gray, too. Like, get the fuck out of here. You're rude. But anyways, I'm not anti-gray. Well, maybe a little bit. So they all start shooting
It
at him.
sure
but
sounds like it.
Yeah. You're a little angry.
They're just boring. It's like, show me a fucking insectoid or a sexy octurian.
Depending on what state you're in, it's not okay to shoot at a gray, or maybe it is. Depending, maybe if you're in Texas, you're fine.
If they abduct you, I'm saying defend yourself. You can shoot at a grave. But like, I don't think I would. I would be like overly sexual back to him. I just try to make them uncomfortable. So,
What? You want to get butt probed? Come on over here.
I mean, you give me the device. I'll do it to myself. Go easy there, buddy. So, so Cliff and they start shooting at these motherfuckers, right? And nothing's happening. So whatever these things aren't worried about it. It's either going through them or bouncing off them. They can't really tell. There's some high strangeness going on here, guys. Like this fucking airplane is somehow smaller, this B-2 these things are like ghosts in the woods, and they kind of just start walking towards them like, okay, they want us out of here. They back all the way up to this river and kind of leave the area for a second, wait a while, and then they go back and everything's fine. They call in these giant helicopters, they cut off the wings and take the wreckage out because they don't want it to fall into enemy hands, and there's no more incidents with the aliens. Like they're just gone, and that's the end of it. So that's really where I want to end with the Cliff Stone story. R.I.P. Cliff Stone. He's always someone I've listened to probably since 2001 when he was on Stephen Greer's Disclosure for not Disclosure Project, but Disclosure event at the National Press Club. He has a lot of interesting stories. He's highly credible, and I just think he's a big figure in the USO space. And thank you so much for your work, Cliff Stone. You're my boy.
Crazy.
Cool.
What month did the Vietnam thing happen? Was it July or March?
It's a great question. I didn't write down the date because you know me with details. I don't know. I can't tell. But I'm going to look all these up actually, and we'll follow up in the next podcast because I didn't pay attention to dates too much, especially when I was researching 5,000 things at the same time. Yeah.
I just want to say that, and I know I think I've talked about it on some other podcasts, but actually, there's a lot of UFO activity that happens in the Vietnam War. That some of it's with Clifford Stone besides that story, but there's a lot of other really crazy stuff that happens, and they can't explain it because who they're fighting, the North Vietnamese, they don't even have this technology, not even close. So
Right.
there's all this really weird stuff that happened with fighter jets and weird stuff that happened in the jungle. There's just all sorts of crazy stories, and it's amazing to me that barely any of them have come out. There's been a couple that I covered for History Channel, but even then, it's like nobody really picked up the ball and ran with. There's just so much weird shit that happened in Vietnam, extraterrestrial, supernatural type stuff.
Yeah,
That's a show
they
in
just
and of itself.
the mainstream
Yeah.
just can't really go into the high strangeness. It's too fucking weird. Like the aliens clearly were interested in how a plane gets shot down and brought it to the ground. Like it's just too weird. Like how do you say that? It's all nuts and bolts in like History Channel. It's like, look, there's a UFO in the sky at the northwest position, and that's as far as they go. But it's so much
Right.
more interesting
Yeah.
and beautiful and a little
Yeah.
scary, man. Like Jesus, it is a little scary. I admit.
Right.
I think
mean,
even the
Go ahead, sorry.
so I just think even the, you know, if we're getting on the esoteric stuff a little bit here, the amount of negative energy that's released with like all the people dying at a war or a bomb going off or whatever, you know, just that in and of
Yeah.
itself, we know sort of attracts
Mothman,
things
aliens.
not of this
Yeah.
world, you know.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, totally.
Agree. Agree. And that you're totally you just touched on like a really big point, Matt, is that this idea that this Earth is like this huge feeding zone. I mean, what's a place that you would definitely go to feed? Like a war zone for sure. I mean, the fear and anger and all the emotions that are running high. I mean, that would be the place for sure.
Yeah.
So
Or if you're studying something, if you're studying a species, we love to study animals fight. So who, an advanced race would want to watch us fight?
Oh, we love a good animal fight, don't we?
Me too.
Says the Australian.
Have you guys ever fought a kangaroo? No, I'm kidding.
I've seen that video though, with the guy who punches one in the face like 1,000
Oh
times.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Have you?
No.
Oh,
Not yet.
come on.
We'll get there.
Come on. All right. All
We'll
right.
get there.
Next podcast. I want to hear a full story.
All
Matt,
right.
what you got? What you got?
Well, look, I've discovered that if I'm struggling to find a decent story, I just need to type in the word Brazil and UFO into Google, and just a fucking goldmine. It really is.
Ooh, okay.
So I happened across a little story that came from Brazil in a little town called Vagina, or as I like to say, Vagina. I don't know how it's pronounced. It's probably not vagina.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Vagina.
The only guy
Vagina.
on this podcast who knows how to pronounce everything doesn't know how to pronounce a name of a Brazilian town.
I purposefully
I'm
didn't look up the
calling your
pronunciation
bluff, buddy.
because I wanted to say vagina. Anyway, so
Okay. So what
This
happened in
was-
Vagina?
let me tell you what happens in Vagina. There was a UFO that came out of Vagina. So the
How big was it?
classy stuff. Anyway, so this
Go
happened
on.
in '96. So relatively, when we're talking about the
Was it
40s and all that sort
Was
of
it
stuff.
vibrating?
Was it what?
Was it vibrating?
Oh, it may have been. It was smoking. I don't think it was dropping any angel hair, though. That's good.
There it is.
So this happened in 1996, and the story initially came to light after several witnesses reported seeing, in particular, there was these three girls, actually. They reported seeing at about 3:20 in the afternoon on January 30th. And actually, this started in January, and it sort of developed over the next couple of months until April. So it did hit March, but the actual, sightings and stuff were in January, so... Anyway. So anyway, they reported seeing a strange humanoid creature who they said appeared to be injured, which was interesting. So these three witnesses, these girls, they were 14, 16, 22. Two of them were sisters, and they had their friend with them. They were walking on their way home when they decided to take a shortcut through a vacant lot where they spotted this creature. And they were immediately terrified, obviously, and they ran all the way home, and they went like hysterically screaming at their mother, saying that they had seen the devil, El Diablo, was hiding in the bushes.
Oh.
So all up in that same day, there were a number of odd sightings. I think when I was going through some documentation, they were talking about there was at least 7 different sightings of these creatures. It wasn't just one of them. And a lot of them did appear to be injured in some way. These creatures were all spotted, and some of the witnesses had seen them interacting with military people who were trying to swoop in and capture these things. So here's what these things look like. Here's a description. There were bipeds around 1.6 meters, or about 5 feet tall. Had a large head, very thin body with these V-shaped feet, which was weird. It's this brown, rubbery kind of skin and these large red eyes. And they also reported having these 3 sort of protruding, not horns, but these sort of like a little bony structures coming out of the top of their heads.
I could see the devil analogy then. Yeah, that's weird. Red eyes.
That's why these girls
bones, yeah.
thought it was the devil, yeah.
Huh.
So and they see, the girls said that it seemed to be wobbly or unsteady, and the girls assumed it was either injured or sick. So when they actually, it was funny, the official report that came out after they did an official report, because I guess something happened, but they did this huge cover up too, which I basically talked about in the Brazil story from last week's show as well. But they did it really well in this, where there's no documentation on this, and it's all really based on eyewitness accounts. So people obviously can, scoff at it and call it bullshit all they want, because it's all really just, people's eyewitness accounts that they base all this off. But the official investigation said that all these girls saw was a crazy homeless man who was covered in mud, and they mistook him for the devil, obviously.
Maybe it was a weather balloon. I don't know.
Yeah, swamp gas.
There was another sighting at
swamp gas.
Yeah, swamp gas. Yeah. So there was another sighting apparently that happened. So, like I said, 7 other times they had seen over the next couple of days. One of them being at the local zoo. One of the workers got there in the morning, I guess, saw one of these things scurrying around the premises, and it kind of ran off. And that one, I think the official story, there was 2 of them actually there, I think. And that one they said it was a local dwarf couple. A couple who were dwarves who were just running around the zoo.
That's disrespectful to dwarves.
Yeah.
Of course it was.
What?
But mysteriously over the next...
Little people running around?
Yeah.
With red eyes and horns on their head.
Right.
Drunk or unsteady. Jesus.
You've never seen that?
At my brother's bachelor party.
Nice.
Oh my God. Josh, I have so many questions. I'm scared.
Oh dear.
You should be, because I'm scarred for life.
Can't unsee that. You can't unsee that shit. Yeah. So at the zoo, they said over the next few months, several of the animals mysteriously died of unknown causes too after this, which was odd. It could have been anything, but there was just an odd little point afterwards. Okay. So when the sisters had gone home and hysterically told their mother about what they'd seen, the mother obviously didn't believe them, but she agreed to go back to the place where they'd seen it. So she went back with them, and all they found were these odd little footprints, this V-shaped footprints, and I can't quite picture. I haven't really seen a decent picture of what they mean by V-shape, where they have like 2 toes kind of pointed that way, or I don't know what that means.
Like Star Trek.
Yeah, like
a hoof
box thing, something like that. Yeah. But as well as the footprints. They noted there was this horribly strong ammonia-type smell in the area, and it was like overpoweringly strong. It was a terrible smell. And in fact, I think was it the Wall Street Journal? Something like that? Anyway, it went big paper back in 97, did a story on this, and they called it like the stinking aliens or something like that. Anyway. So the days before the incident, according to an unknown Brazilian Air Force member, legit, he reported that the U.S. agency NORAD had alerted the Brazilian military of 2 UFOs seen heading towards the Vagina area. So, you know.
Insert joke here.
Insert
I was waiting for something.
Insert obelisk here. Okay.
Right.
There you go. Nice.
Did it happen in
Done.
July? Did it happen in July?
No, this was January.
God
Starts with a
damn
J.
it.
Does that help?
All right. No. All right, keep going.
Okay. NORAD was alerted the Brazilian military and air force that these 2 UFOs were heading towards this area. So the following day, an ultralight pilot by the name of Carlos Souza was heading. He was driving his truck and it kind of through a very rural kind of area on the outskirts of Vagina, and he heard what he thought was his truck making this really weird sound. So he pulls the truck over to see what was going on, obviously, and then like turns the truck off, and he can still hear it. So he gets out of the truck, and over in the distance, set about 100 meters or so away to his left, he sees this huge cigar-shaped UFO hovering above the field. And he said there was a line of windows along the side of this thing, what he thought was windows, like these shapes. and through the side in the middle, towards the back of this thing was this huge gaping crack, like something had torn a hole in this thing, and it was just pouring out smoke and vapor and all sort of stuff coming out the side of it.
Huh.
So he got back in his truck and tried to kind of follow this thing. It wasn't moving real fast. It was kind of just floating, obviously in some kind of emergency. He tried to follow it along the road until it kind of went over this little mountain range. And he said after it went past the mountain range, it sort of suddenly started to descend and crashed into plummeted towards the forest. So he kept following and tried, it was like, holy shit, and was like following this thing and tried to drive as fast as he could to try and catch up to where it hit the ground. So he managed to find a dirt road that led into the area where this UFO came down, and he drove up through the forested area, up the road, where he came to a place where he found this just wreckage just spread through the forest where something had just come down and crashed, obviously. And he was like, holy shit. And when he got out of his truck and sort of came over this ridgeline of wreckage and stuff, he saw that the military and a bunch of emergency vehicles were already on scene. It's like they were sitting there, like you said before, they were waiting for it to come down. They'd obviously, maybe they even shot it down, I don't know. So they were there waiting, already cautioning off, already like cutting off the scene from everyone else. So he was in the area and at the site, and it was apparently very close to a military base too. It was like right by a military base where it sort of came down. So it makes sense that maybe they shot it down there. So he was close. He was able to get close enough to be able to pick up a piece of the material from the craft, and he said it looks like it should be heavy, but it was oddly light. In fact, when he dropped it, it kind of floated to the ground, which is odd. This material that came out of it,
like the town in Japan, where it's just coming from the sky.
Yeah, he didn't describe what it looked like. I couldn't find where he described what it looked like, but he said, it was really super light and floated to the ground. But obviously standing there in the middle of the field with military all around, he was almost immediately spotted, and these two soldiers came running over to him, pointing machine guns at him, and ordered him to immediately leave the area. And he did. He just jumped in his truck and got the fuck out of there. He was terrified. He went straight to a diner that was not too far down the road, and sort of sat there trying to get his bearings, trying to get his shit together for the next 2 hours, because he was just so like, holy shit, what did I just see?
Right.
While he was sitting there for the next 2 hours, two military guys pulled up in a car. They came over to him at his table. These big guys, he said, they weren't wearing military uniforms, but he could tell, they had the crew cuts, big dudes. They came into the diner. One of them came over to him and said, "Hey, your name's Carlos Souza, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes." And then they, proceeded to tell him everything about himself, So it's kind of like the basic intimidation of like, "We know everything about you, big guy. Here's what's going to happen next." And he basically said, like, "Don't ever fucking tell anyone about this story ever again." And it wasn't until, I think it was about a year later when he finally read, he didn't put this together, but he finally read an article about what these three little girls had seen. And then he was like, oh, that was the same day, like around about the same time when I'd seen this. And so he contacted the author who wrote the article, and he agreed to like tell his story and take him back to where he'd seen this stuff. So getting back to those three girls actually in the same line of like intimidation here, the two sisters were at home in the next couple of days after they had reported this, seeing this thing, and they got a knock at the door, and these four strange, again, like just plain suited guys came to the door, but obviously military looking, they said again. They didn't identify themselves who they were, but they kind of pushed their way in through the door, invited themselves inside. Basically sat the girls down, wanted to hear exactly what they had seen, and then tried to convince them that that's not what they'd seen. They hadn't seen this at all. It was just this, this homeless guy covered in mud. That's all it was. No big deal. And then they were
gas.
like, no, we know what we saw. And then they basically were saying, okay, we're going to give you a shit ton of money if you go on the radio, the media, whatever, and say that you made it up. Here's a shitload of money. And I guess they didn't do that. I did hear something that one of them came out and said, "Oh yeah, we made that up." So maybe she took the cash. I don't know. But I couldn't find anywhere else that there was one mention of it in a YouTube video I watched where someone had said they might have heard that, but I couldn't find anything about it. So, not that didn't happen, but anyway. So they were warned also not to talk about the story ever again, but they did. So another eyewitness, just after this guy was driving through the forest and he like chased it into this big crashing thing into the forest. On that same morning, a couple who owned a farm rushed outside because all their animals were just going insane. They were sprinting around, doing circles around the yard. They came outside to see what they were freaking out about, and they also described this huge fucking cigar-shaped object with this huge gaping crack in the middle of it with smoke pouring out.
Gaping.
Traveling super slowly, and they said it was only like 5 meters above the ground. Are you laughing at the big crack in Vicky?
No, I just was repeating the word gaping for no particular reason.
Yeah, it's a good word. It's like moist. But yeah, they said this thing was going super slow, traveling about 5 meters above the ground. And it was going so slow, actually, they stood outside for 40 to 45 minutes just watching this thing before it left out of view.
Oh, I need that experience.
Yeah.
I need to see something like
No one
incredible in
grabbed
my
the camera,
lifetime.
obviously.
Well, it's also a
No
really
one.
cool experience because multiple different people now have seen it from multiple different vantage points. There's always adds
Yeah.
a high degree of degree of credibility to the story.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
Yep. So that was the ship that came down. Then about a week later, and I think this was on the 20th, the fire department got a call. Actually, the ships that the people saw were seen about a week before all the little creatures had been seen.
Yeah.
So I guess like when it came down, maybe there was a bunch of them that escaped. I don't know. Anyway,
I never heard of these aliens. By the way, before you go on, I never heard of this alien before. I've never
I haven't either.
described
no.
a hoofed, bumpy head, red-eyed,
Yeah.
devil-looking creature like that. I don't want to see that.
Right.
That's
Yeah, really
is
bizarre little description for sure.
Is that connected
Yeah.
to our mythology? Is that connected to our past in some way? You know?
I don't know. Yeah, and it wasn't just like one person who described it. It was several people describing the same thing, actually, which is interesting.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, on the 20th, the fire department got a call from some people who had spotted a wild animal running through the bush. In the fire department, apparently, if you see like, you know, dangerous animals, wild dogs, snakes, and all sorts of other stuff, that you call them or the military police, and they'll come take care of it out of the area. You know, it's Brazil. There's some crazy shit in the forest, obviously.
Yeah.
But when the fireys arrived on site, on the scene, they found this family just standing on the side of the road, and they were watching this thing descend down this embankment and sort of scurry off as best it could into the forest. And they said they were talking to the mother, and she had 2 young boys with her, and she said the boys found this creature lying on the side of the road, and they thought it was dead, and the boys started throwing rocks at it to see if they could get it to move, and it shot up and like started like scurrying away. So apparently, yeah, obviously this thing is injured or sick or whatever. I don't know what's going on.
Well, maybe it's just not used to our atmosphere. It probably got a hole blown in its crack.
Or our
Could be.
dimension.
Yeah,
Or our
it's like-
dimension.
Well,
Right.
why I think it was sick, and we'll get to that before. I mentioned the animals dying, right?
Yeah.
After it went through the zoo, and we'll get to some more of that in a bit here.
Yeah.
Anyway, also at the same scene, this horrible ammonia smell, this like fucking strong, acrid smell that was going through the area where this thing was also noted. So the fireys told the family to get the fuck out of the area, immediately get out of here. The firemen called the military and immediately started chasing this thing through the forest. And apparently the forest is super thick and there's not a whole lot to trying to get through, and this thing was pretty quick apparently, but it said they were chasing this thing for a solid 2 hours before they actually caught it. And they were able to grab this thing and pull it back up to the side where the military were waiting for them, and they immediately threw this thing in a truck and hauled it away.
Aww.
I know. Poor little guy.
I kind of feel bad. I mean, he's just trying to survive. I mean, can you imagine if your ship got shot down and you crashed into some other weird planet? You're just trying to escape?
Yeah.
Right.
And it didn't ever seem like these things were posed a threat at all. I mean, unless there was some, like I said, we'll get to that in a second, they had some sort of biological virus or something that we, aren't equipped to deal with. It was
right.
kind of
They could
people
still
over.
be dangerous without actually trying to inflict harm on us. That's a
Right.
huge deal. Mm-hmm. If I was in a
It's
position
just like when
of
all
power, I'd
the
be
Europeans landed in the Americas, and they got most Native American cultures got smallpox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing. It was.
Exact same thing.
I mean, granted, they did some other bad shit, but just their very existence caused a virus through the people of the Americas. So yes, that's true. But
Biological warfare.
I do kind of feel bad for these little
Poor
horned
little guy.
aliens. I know.
Poor little V-shaped foot fella. So anyway, later in that day in the same area, a jogger who was running through the roads there reported having seen a military truck pull up suddenly on the side of the road, and a bunch of soldiers hopped out and just like charged off into the forest. And he sort of ran past and like kept running. It was like, what the fuck is going on there? Not long after, he heard 3 distinct gunshots, like bam, bam, bam.
Ooh.
And he was like, fuck. So he decides to like sort of sneak on back to see what the fuck was going on. So he goes sort of back to the side a little bit, out of the way so he can't be seen. And he sees these soldiers coming back up the hill to their truck carrying, they're all kind of carrying these 2 body bags. One of the bags was like, had something in it that was trying to kick its way out. It was like alive still. And the other one was like dead still. So I guess they got one of them. And the other one was like, fine, I'll get in the bag. I know, they got one. So what was really weird after this point was later this same evening, after all these little creatures had been seen around the town, this crazy and sudden, that wasn't reported as going to be happening by meteorologists or whatever, a sudden violent hailstorm hit the area, this exact area, and just like decimated all the trees. It was smashing windows and ruining cars and stuff. And it obviously like completely, took out any sort of evidence left by these things in the area too, which was interesting. It's almost a little bit missing 411, that happens when people go missing and it's preceding a huge storm or inclement weather of some kind. Mm-hmm. And so there's just a couple more things after this that were super interesting. So one of the soldiers who were carrying these things out of the forest, was it soldier or was it fireman? Anyway, one of the guys who came in direct contact with one of these creatures was later reported from the family of the soldier who had handled the creature that he died of some unknown illness following the contact.
Ooh,
and here's what it says. Within 2 weeks after these officers picked up the creature, one of them died of an unknown condition. This deceased military police officer left behind a wife and 2 children. He died in the hospital, and numerous rumors abound pertaining to his cause of death. Supposedly, there was no death certificate issued, no medical records available, and no witnesses to talk about the situation. And there was this part where, let's see, a television production company from the UK came to Vagina the year following the incident and performed an investigation on the case. The resultant program was shown in the UK. One of the individuals they interviewed was the sister of the deceased military police officer. On camera, she had stated her brother had a high fever, was severely dehydrated, could not eat, and had bleeding from certain areas of his body. Yikes.
Ew.
And then was finally unable to remain conscious or communicate before he passed away.
Some alien COVID.
Someone said it sounds suspiciously similar to symptoms associated with Ebola, which was interesting.
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a whole another rabbit hole that we could just go down. Like
That's
maybe
can of
like
worms right
aliens brought Ebola.
Could be. Alien Rona. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's one sort of bizarre little piece that was kind of it, the story. Like I said, it wasn't, people have a hard time with this one because it's all based on eyewitness accounts and there's really not much evidence other than that. But it's pretty good evidence. Like, it's not like it's, it could be wild stories, but there's a lot of people making up the same story or have agreed to tell the same story, which is
really hard actually to do. Even if they know each other, they can never really remember all the details if they made it up. So I actually think that given the amount of different angles, different perspectives of the same thing, that there might be some truth to it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. There was a really interesting kind of bizarre end note to this. In 1998, a Brazilian video game developer called Perceptum released a video game called Incidente em Varginha. Basically, the vagina.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
It's so good, isn't it? I really enjoyed this, guys. It's called the Vagina Incident, sometimes known as Alien Anarchy. They made this video game of this whole incident, basically, where it's like a crappy late 1990s first-person shooter where you're kind of running around shooting aliens and stuff. I just looked it up out of curiosity and saw some guy playing it on YouTube, and it was like terrible. Like, even for that time, it was like really bad. It was full of bugs, and it was like almost unplayable in some areas. It kept crashing and stuff. But there was just this odd little note, and I'll read it here, that's on the Wikipedia page for it. The game was announced in a press release on October 9th, 98. After release, Perceptum signed an agreement with US Special Forces Training Center and NovaLogic in order to use the software to train Delta Force soldiers.
What?
Yeah. I don't know why that is. It's just a really weird little note that was like about this really terrible video game, to be honest.
Yeah, really weird, because it's not like they would need to train them on video games if it's a bad video game.
Yeah.
Unless it was about training them of the incident.
It sounds like a clever thing the creator of the game did to give it more cred.
Right.
You know, that's what it feels like.
Yeah,
to me.
that's true. You're right.
If the video game was really good,
it was just
maybe
it's just a really obscure little Brazilian video game company, and Brazil's obviously not a huge company, huge country known for their video games, especially back in the 90s, which is weird. It only sold like 20,000 copies. It wasn't like a huge deal. And for some reason, the US Special Forces wanted to license this game to use in their training. It was just bizarre. And actually, the start of the video game starts off with 2 fighter jets who shoot down this craft. And it crashes into the forest, which is interesting.
This is all coming back to the beginning.
Yeah. Bizarre
we got to
stuff.
stop shooting down UFOs is what we got to start doing as a culture. It's fucking ridiculous.
They're full of Rona, Ebola.
Full of Rona, Ebola, and lots of advanced technology that we seem to already have, but it's barely coming out.
Right?
Right? Well, I don't know. I've really enjoyed this. I mean, I know that I gave everybody a bunch of random information at the beginning of the show to ponder over, but it's not so crazy. We might be dealing with a situation where the governments of the world are tapped into these things, and when they hit our atmosphere, when they hit our dimension, and they're able to capture them, shoot them down. And I don't know, that's pretty interesting. And the release of these documents, if this is true, as this investigator has pointed out, that he has 154 pages minus 5. On the fact that they have been investigating these crash sites and they've been investigating the technology. This is actually bigger news to me than just some of the disclosure stuff that's been coming out, because it's kind of like we already kind of knew all that stuff. But this is verifying that they have the technology, because they've investigated, they have it. Who knows what they've done with it? This is actually bigger news, and it makes sense that it would be in some, small publication like The Sun, which is like, It's like the sun. It's not like the New York Times or Wall Street or any of that kind of stuff. And it would make sense that like they haven't picked up the story that this is kind of just like bleeding in slowly in the background. But to me, I think it's a bigger deal.
It's physical contact. It's not just seeing something floating around and lights in the sky. It's like we have something in our hands. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Exactly. Bigger deal. All right, everybody. Watch out, because March is coming up, so be careful. I mean, something's going to happen to you in the sky, or maybe a butt probe. I don't know. Talk to Josh about it. I have
you could be so lucky.
Information on that.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.